You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, December 26, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. And for my non-U.S. listeners out there, happy Boxing Day. I think they're doing that in Australia, Canada, England. It's all Boxing Day there, right? Has to do with putting together presents for your boss or something like that. Something completely un-American. So happy Boxing Day to those of you who are celebrating that. And I hope you all had a great holiday season. We took a few days off for the Christmas break, and it was a good break here at Delta 9 House and Studios. We are ready to get right into 2018. We've got all sorts of great shows coming up. This week will be kind of a retrospective of some of my best events in the cannabis community throughout 2017. And today, we're going to start that off with a look at the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle and how the activists in Virginia started this year, I should say, how they started this year. We're still in 2017. We hear from a couple of state delegates. Delegate Davis and Delegate Heretick will be speaking. Also, John Hudak from the Brookings Institution made an appearance there at the Virginia conference. And we spoke to activist Creed Leffler, who is fighting for medical cannabis access. So that's all coming up in the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle. Also on the program today, we'll have time for a radical rant that is inspired by a recent discussion I had with a friend of mine who's lamenting the fact that the price of weed is crashing. And I'm trying to understand why that's a bad thing. We'll talk about that coming up in the Radical Rant entitled The Days of the $2,000 Pound Are Over. But before we get to all that, we got our cannabis headline news, and the biggest breaking news story that happened this weekend has to do with the founder and executive director of Marijuana Policy Project, Rob Kampia, leaving the organization. We'll get that to you in the cannabis headline news, and then in our What in the News segment, we're going to spend the rest of the time discussing the background of that story and why it's, I guess, good that it finally happened, but it should have happened 7 years ago. That's what we're going to talk about. All right, so that's all coming up today in the Marijuana Agenda. I thank everyone who's been a supporter of the show. Check us out at mjagenda.com for the free podcast. And if you'd like to help keep this podcast free for people, you can become a donor at mjagenda.com. Click the Become a Patron button, and for as little as $4.20 a month, you can keep us on the air.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, December 26, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. Marijuana Policy Project founder Rob Kampia is no longer employed by or serves on the board of that organization. He is starting a new cannabis policy group called Marijuana Leadership Campaign, structured as a for-profit LLC consulting firm. The new company, quote, will focus almost exclusively on changing U.S. laws, end quote, Kampia said in a relatively unusual memo shared with Marijuana Moment late Saturday night, which also says the firm has lined up, quote, nearly $500,000 in seed money from a, quote, marijuana investment firm in Los Angeles, a major marijuana dispensary in Colorado, Kampia's wealthy friends in Texas, where he lives half-time, and a coalition of new donors in South Carolina, end quote. The split with MPP is occurring as greater attention is being paid to past allegations of sexual misconduct by Kampia amidst a national backlash against workplace sexual harassment and abuse. A new study hammers another nail in the coffin of the so-called amotivational syndrome attributed to marijuana use. Researchers at Florida International University examined associations between cannabis use and several motivation indices among adolescents. While they hypothesized that regular cannabis users would report lower motivation than light users, and that greater lifetime and past 30-day cannabis use amounts would be associated with decreased motivation, the findings prove the opposite. After controlling for confounds, no significant differences were observed between regular and light users on any motivation index. Similarly, no associations between motivation and lifetime or past 30-day use were observed. The findings do not support a link between reduced motivation and cannabis use among adolescents after controlling for relevant compounds. Congress passed a short-term government funding bill Thursday. The House passed the measure, which would keep the federal agencies open through January 19th on a 231 to 188 vote. The Senate cleared it 66 to 32 soon after, giving congressional leaders and President Donald Trump another month to hash out a long-term spending deal for the remainder of fiscal 2018. The short-term funding bill also extends a federal surveillance program, includes money to continue the Children's Health Insurance Program through March, and waives automatic cuts to Medicare and other programs, which were threatened because of the GOP tax bill's big deficit increase. The deal also keeps in place the current protections from federal interference for state legal medical marijuana programs. Attorney General Sessions on Wednesday announced that the Department of Justice has created a new senior-level position, Director of Opioid Enforcement and Prevention Efforts. The director will be responsible for assisting the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and department components in formulating and implementing department initiatives, policies, grants, and programs relating to opioids, and coordinating these efforts with law enforcement. In announcing the position, Attorney General Sessions said that, quote, creating a senior-level position at the department to focus entirely on this issue leaves him feeling, quote, confident that we can and will turn the tide of the drug crisis. West Coast fast food leader Jack in the Box is joining forces with Snoop Dogg's cannabis media company, Mary Jane. The brands will launch a campaign in January that commemorates the legalization of recreational cannabis in California with a limited edition Mary Munchie meal in 3 select Long Beach locations. A timely play on Jack in the Box's popular late-night menu. The new Mary Munchie meal will be infused with the most craveable and snackable products that Jack in the Box has to offer, including half curly fries, half onion rings, 2 of the brand's famous tacos, 5 mini churros, and 3 crispy chicken strips, plus a drink, all for a very special price of $4.20. The Centers for Disease Control announced this month there were more than 63,600 fatal drug overdoses in 2016. The age-adjusted rate of drug overdose deaths increased from 6.1 per 100,000 population in 1999 to 19.8 in 2016. The rate increased on average by 10% per year from 1999 to 2006, 3% per year from 2006 to 2014, and 18% per year from 2014 to 2016. West Virginia leads the nation with 52 deaths per 100,000, followed by Ohio, New Hampshire, District of Columbia, and Pennsylvania, and 18 other states that have overdose rates greater than the national average. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, December 26, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. The Marijuana Agenda is a listener-supported independent podcast brought to you by Radical Russ Media, LLC. Subscribe to our VIP feed at mjagenda.com for access to our ad-free podcast segment archive. Make a one-time donation to support the Marijuana Agenda at paypal.me/radicalruss. The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
And let me be clear about marijuana. It is a potentially dangerous gateway drug that frequently leads to the use of harder drugs.
Whatever you're smoking, it's not marijuana.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
People should say no to drug use.
It's really, really easy.
Adding more gasoline to the fire.
Lackadaisical. Really tough, really big, really great
To infect and rot our nation from within.
Dangerous gateway drug.
We don't need to be legalizing marijuana.
to build and grow a stronger, healthier, and drug-free society.
Today in What in the News, we take a look at the departure of the founder of the Marijuana Policy Project, Rob Kampia, from any role at MPP, leaving He's no longer a member of the board. He's no longer executive director. He's no longer moved into some diagonal position. He is out of there. And for many people that have been reporting on this story, it's been about 7 years too late. If you don't know the background on this one, it culminated in a story in the Washington City paper back in 2010 called "The Breast Massage Will Happen." And the story detailed how Rob Kampia had created and maintained a culture of sexual harassment at Marijuana Policy Project that was well known by those of us inside the movement all throughout those years. But everyone was very reticent to want to do anything about it because you got to give him this. Rob Kampia is a hell of a fundraiser. He has probably raised the most money for marijuana reform of anybody in this world and has done it to great effect, having a major influence in the passing of about half of the state medical marijuana laws and about 5 out of 8 of the state legalization laws. Now, throughout this memo and throughout these announcements, it's been a very strange situation. We heard about this toward just about after Thanksgiving when there was an announcement from MPP that Kampia would be stepping aside as executive director and moving to a lateral position, director of strategic initiatives or something like that. And I and others in the movement saw this as the transparent public relations move it was. And they continue to deny this. In the latest memo, they say, oh, no, we've been talking with Rob since October when it comes to leaving. We've been talking for months and months about him moving along. But you can't deny that this Me Too movement, this whole Harvey Weinstein sexual harassment volcano that's erupted here in America, had a lot to do with this. They don't want to say that it did, but folks, come on, let's take a look at the timing of this thing. First of all, when you're a major organization, you don't announce major changes to your executive leadership staff over a holiday weekend unless there's a really good reason to be doing that. And it's my belief that the folks at MPP saw the building dynamic here having to do with sexual harassment, the Me Too movement, and all of these high-profile, very powerful men being booted out of their jobs. And I think that the folks at MPP saw that and said they needed to get ahead of this. They need to get in front of this, make sure that they nip this thing in the bud, if you'll pardon the pun. So they announced that diagonal move for Kampia, and nobody bought it. Nobody bought it. Everybody in the inside here in the marijuana movement could see what it was. It was, oh, God, here comes the sexual harassment stuff again. Let's get Kampia out of the spotlight so he doesn't tar MPP with all of these past allegations. And it's not just past allegations. Well, let me get to the meat of the 2010 incident, which was there had been some partying. Kampia had taken a bunch of the staff out to a bar. They all got hammered, got drunk, and Kampia decided that one of these subordinates who he'd had his eye on, that she was too drunk to drive. She was driving, and he decided she was too drunk to drive, so he took over and drove for her. But apparently she wasn't so drunk that he couldn't drive her to his apartment and get her to consent with sex with him, right? I don't know where you grew up, but where I grew up, if you're too drunk to drive, you're too drunk to consent to sex. But maybe that's just how we do out here on the West Coast. I don't know what they can do with the East Coast, I guess. So that was the background of that. And it was such a scandal that it led to numerous staffers outright quitting, a major revolt. And it looked at the time like he might actually be ousted. Until someone pointed out that, hey, Rob built this organization. Rob makes all the money in this organization. We lose Rob, we lose all his millionaire and billionaire friends donating to us. And because of that, the MPP board decided at the time that they would be fine with him taking a 3-month leave of absence to go to counseling for his hypersexuality. That's what it was called, hypersexuality. Not being a creep, not being a predator, not being a sexual offender, not being a harasser, just hypersexual. That kind of a passive voice thing, right? What me? I was just sitting here, and all of a sudden I got attacked with a case of hypersexuality. Oh dear. It had a devastating impact on a number of people at the organization. And when he was allowed to go away for 3 months and then come back as if everything was fine, nothing had changed, there were no problems, Rob is cured. Well, the latest scuttlebutt on this is that he's not cured. That there are some incidents that have happened since 2010 that are soon to be written up. In my sources say the Boston Globe is working on the story, but soon to be revealed some other incidents. So once again, when it came down to addressing this back in November, MPP once again tried to pull the wool over people's eyes, tried to, let's just put them off to the side. Let's just make sure we don't upset the cash cow. We don't ruin the goose that lays the golden eggs here. And that, in a microcosm, is exactly why this sort of sexual harassing behavior has been allowed to continue in America. It's why so many women are afraid to stand up and so afraid to speak out, because they know that oftentimes when they do, nothing happens to the person who was the harasser, yet the harassee's career can be severely devastated. So that announcement comes out in November, and we all thought, a sideways demotion. And again, they wouldn't have any mention of this having anything to do with the sexual harassment scandals that are going on. But in this most recent memo, which, by the way, if you go out to Marijuana Moment, you can find the entire memo. It's pretty amazing, some of the ways he talks about this, in that he's kind of dismissing the whole sexual harassment complaints. In the story, Tom Angel writes, when asked if the investors who have already committed nearly $500,000 to the new venture are aware of the looming newspaper story on sexual misconduct allegations, Kampia said that, quote, they know about the worst allegations that have ever been made about me, and I have no reason to believe that the newspaper story will be any worse than that. So these guys are friends of the family, and they're not going to be surprised by anything in the newspaper. And in fact, they might be pleasantly surprised. See, you can see how cured he is in this one, right? Just how seriously he takes this. They've heard the worst allegations against me, and they're fine with it. Yeah, of course your money people are fine with it. You run around with the same kind of people who don't think sexual harassment's any big deal. You were a protege of Peter Lewis, who had sexual harassment all throughout his background. Admittedly, he only self-admitted his inappropriate relationships at work. So it's no surprise to me that you're able to find a few rich guys who also think sexual harassment is no big deal. The question now comes down to where the Kampia organization, this new MLC, which he says is going to be funding a lot of groups out there. In his memo, he says that MPP, NCIA, and New Federalism Fund are leading the charge, and the new company will provide substantial funding for Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and Clergy for a New Drug Policy. Now, Kampia admits that he hasn't cleared the fact that he wants to give those organizations some money. He hasn't cleared it with them yet. So now the question becomes, do other organizations in drug law reform take the sexual harassment allegations seriously enough to reject any funding that Kampia would bring forth? Or once again, is this just a situation where money talks? Where money talks, and if he can come up with the hundreds of thousands needed to fund some of these organizations, they'll once again turn a blind eye to credible allegations of harassment, admitted allegations of harassment. I'm sad to say that I really think that he'll get away with it. Really do. It's sad to me that the marijuana movement, among many, many movements out there, many, many industries out there that are dealing with these allegations of sexual harassment, that we seem to be least interested in addressing them. And there's been some talk about the marijuana industry being a misogynistic, harassing sort of community as it is already. We know many stories of trimmigates, young women who go to trim, who are then forced to trim in the nude and asked to do special favors and so forth. It's about time the marijuana movement started to stand up for these women, started to recognize that we cannot tolerate this sort of alpha male, macho, toxic masculinity anymore. And given that our movement and our product and our industry is something that already suffers from some negative backlash in the media, it behooves us to be above reproach when it comes to these issues, to be in the moral high ground. And I don't know how we can do that if we continue to allow a serial sexual harasser to have major influence on our movement just because he can raise a whole lot of money and has some rich friends.
Hey, this is great, man.
All right, that sound means it's 3:20 in the Pacific time zone, 4:20 in Denver. When we come back, we've got the anti-drug public service announcement of the day from the Church of Scientology, followed by our Southeast Cannabis Chronicle and a look back at the 2017 Virginia NORML Conference. Stay tuned. If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. The Marijuana Agenda free podcast is available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, SoundCloud, and on our Facebook page at MJ Agenda. Free video archives are available at the Radical Russ channel on YouTube. Help keep this media free by making a donation at paypal.me/radicalruss. Now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
They said if I did coke, I could party all night. They said if I did coke, I could party all night. They lied. Find out the truth about cocaine. drugfreeworld.org.
This has been an actual anti-drug public service announcement. To combat this and other drug war hysteria, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific at live.mjagenda.com or download the free podcast at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
The Marijuana Agenda. Like the pharmaceutical agenda, without all the side effects, overdose deaths, insurance.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation. Dry mouth, constipation, indigestion, and abdominal pain,
which can occur without warning and may cause death.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Welcome to the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle, dedicated to the promotion of marijuana activism through the great American South. From Louisiana to Florida and as far north as Kentucky to West Virginia. Now grab some sweet tea to go with your THC. It's time for the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle.
Joined here by a very dedicated activist man by the name of Creed Leffler. Creed, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone. Love you all.
Creed is sitting here in his chair, and he was sitting next to me at the event and brought in this sign that was all about ending the Schedule I designation of cannabis, because he uses cannabis his cerebral palsy. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Using cannabis to treat his cerebral palsy, and so he has a petition to tell us all about. This is on change.org, is it?
Yes, it is on change. Or no, move on. Move on. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. So you can find Creed's petition there at moveon.org. Creed and then Leffler is Leffler. They can find it that way, can't they?
It's hard to find, so it would be easier if you could post a link on your Twitter.
That's what I'll do. You just follow me on Radical Russ, and I'll post the link on Twitter so that you can sign the petition. I already signed it earlier today, and we'll get many more signatures, I'm sure. If you're not cool with the Twitter or whatever, just send me an email, radicalruss@gmail.com. So, Creed, how long have you been doing the petition and activism?
Since May.
Since May?
Yes.
A lot of response?
Yes. Some good, most good, some bad.
Yeah. And you were showing me some pictures of the van wrap you're trying to put together. Is that part of your crusade?
I did put a van wrap together.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, it looks great. So, have you gone to the Virginia Assembly a lot to talk to those legislators?
No, because I've just been doing it my way.
Yeah. Are you going tomorrow?
Yes.
So this will be your first time tomorrow?
Not my first time, but my first time for this.
Yeah. Well, that's great because, I can go and tell people all about medical marijuana till the cows come home. And, what do I know? You can tell them firsthand your story and show them how it actually helps you.
Yeah. And I believe we have 2016 signatures.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked in the count in a while.
Do you know how many you're trying to get?
As many as humanly possible.
All of them. Let's get all of them. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this and standing up for people's rights because, for everyone that's like you, there's 10 more that are too afraid to stand up for it and don't want to put the effort out. So thank you for what you're doing.
And one of my contributing factors is actually Miss Charlotte Fickey.
Yes, little Charlotte.
Yes. And I'd like to put a shout out to the Stanley brothers and the great work that they do.
Yeah.
Please get in contact with me. I would love to work with you.
All right.
On a cultural level.
Stanley Brothers, you heard it here first. Creed Leffler is ready to help. He's ready to work with you guys. And I might be able to get you in touch with those guys. So just email me and I'll see what I can do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So visit moveon.org, sign Creed's petition. Let's get cannabis out of Schedule I so they can study it. We can get the full medical benefits that everyone deserves.
Love you, Radical Russ.
I love you too, Creed, man. Take it easy, bro.
So that's where that bill is. It's drafted. It's not very broad. I actually thought, do we need a broader bill? I was advised not to do a broader bill, which I'm glad I didn't, because after talking to the chairman of the Courts of Justice yesterday, he said, Glenn, here's the 3 things that have to be shown for us to expand this. And Dave Alba is a good friend of mine. He's a great guy. He's very direct, which I can appreciate. And the first is that we have to prove that there are studies that say this helps. And those studies are out there. We've all seen them. That cannabis oil makes a difference. So we have to have those. And I've been working with many people to help put those studies together so we can supply those. The second thing that we have to show is that there are doctors that say this medical science makes sense, that this truly is something that they want to prescribe. And that gets to be a little bit difficult, you see, because not all doctors specialize in Crohn's disease, and not all doctors specialize or understand the value of cannabis oil with regards to Crohn's disease. So trying to pull that medical expertise into a committee room on a given day on arguably sometimes 24 to 48 hours notice can be a little bit difficult. That's the second thing we have to prove. But the third thing, and this is the most important thing that we have to prove, is that the other solutions out there are not working. They're not solutions that are making a difference in people's lives, or they're so terrible that it's something that we should be avoiding if there was an alternative.
But I think, the question becomes, do marijuana arrests really serve as a Trojan horse for other types of selective law enforcement? I can tell you the amount of times I've stood in court and heard, stop the car, strong odor of marijuana. Never once in 30 years of practicing law as I've heard anyone say weak odor of marijuana. So, obviously that gives entree to other things. Fourth Amendment issues, search and seizure, it gives probable cause to a lot of other problems. I will say this, and going back to my Board of Medicine experience, I think one of the more practical issues we're going to see if marijuana is permitted for medical types of medical use is where in Virginia you're going to find a doctor to write that prescription. Okay? Because as we all know, opiate addiction is a big, big issue today. I've taken a lot of licenses in the 10 years that I was on the board for doctors who were writing OxyContin with an open hand. Okay, and I think that there are a lot of doctors out there who are thinking, well, at least that's Schedule 2. That's kind of legal. If they're going to take my license for that, somebody comes in with Crohn's disease or epilepsy or other types of neurological disorders or we need appetite stimulation for related to cancer treatment. Yeah, I'm with that, but I'm sure as hell not going to put my signature on a prescription. Okay, because we know what that leads to.
I heard a lot of people, a lot of progressives, a lot of liberals saying there's no difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. They're going to be the same thing, just another corporatist, insider hack. If you think that Hillary Clinton would have banned people from 7 majority Muslim countries yesterday if she were president, you're insane. If you think that a lot of the executive actions that have been passed in the first 9 days of this administration would have looked exactly like the executive orders and presidential memoranda that would have been passed under Hillary Clinton, you're insane. These are two very different individuals with two very different ideologies. You can hate both of them, that's fine. You can think that they're not going to push forward with the type of progress that you necessarily want. But the idea that there was no consequence between Trump or Clinton is a total misreading of American politics, of political ideologies, and of the candidates themselves. And so when you look out now at the marijuana policy landscape, people are terrified. They might have been terrified if Hillary Clinton was president, but I know one thing for sure. It's hard to guess, it's hard to make predictions about presidential politics, but here's one I am certain of. Jeff Sessions would not be Hillary Clinton's attorney general. Russ put up a lot of quotes that Jeff Sessions said. It sounded like drug war rhetoric from the 1970s or 1980s and not from 2016. But those are legitimate and serious words from a United States senator. I think Russ and I disagree a little bit about what Sessions will be like as Attorney General, but there is a risk to the marijuana movement that Jeff Sessions presents. He will have the institutional power to make a mess of the marijuana industry, to make a mess of the reform movement. There is a serious need for advocacy organizations like yours, not only, again, to push forward with what you know and love and believe, and not only to help elect the officials who you think will represent your views best, but also to hold to account the individuals who the president selects to run this government. Those people need to hear your voices in the same way that they will hear other voices. There are a lot of myths out there about what marijuana policy is going to look like under Donald Trump. I've spoken at a couple of conferences in the past few weeks, and I've spoken on this issue, and I've heard people speak on this issue. There's this idea that Donald Trump isn't going to do anything negative to medical or recreational marijuana because public opinion is so high. Well, if public opinion was so high, if public opinion was the determinant of what our policy looked like, we would have comprehensive immigration reform, universal background checks for guns, and a heck of a lot of other policies that we don't have now, and we'd be scrapping a lot of policies that we do. That 62% or 63% of Americans support recreational legalization means nothing to the President of the United States. That 80 to 85% of Americans support medical marijuana legalization means nothing to the President of the United States. The other myth is that the industry is too big. You can't do anything about an industry that has grown that big. I spoke at a cannabis investors conference in LA a couple of weeks ago. This is the core of this idea that the industry has grown in such a robust way. And I was not the popular guy in the room when I told them, your industry is small by any metric of American capitalism. You are a speck of dust in a clutter of dirt of American capitalism. I said, the president, at that time the president-elect, is planning to repeal the Affordable Care Act. If you think that hospitals, doctors, and the pharmaceutical industry are small enough to be shaken down by the president, but the cannabis industry is too big to face the same challenge from the president, once again, you're insane.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is brought to you by Cannabis Kamikaze, a professional licensed producer from Canada producing 3 pounds per light. Follow Cannabis Kamikaze on Twitter at Cannabis Kamikaze. That's at Cannabis, Kamikaze. Cannabis Kamikaze.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
We need to say, as Nancy Reagan said, just say no. Don't do it. There's no excuse for this.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
Federal prosecutors have been ordered to pursue the toughest possible sentences for criminal suspects. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions issued a memo May 10th rolling back Obama-era reforms that eased sentencing for some nonviolent drug offenders. Anthony Papa is the manager of media and artist relations for the Drug Policy Alliance. Papa says Sessions' reinstatement of harsher sentencing policies will destroy families because the breadwinners will be locked up for extensive periods of time.
Not only is going to put people with drug problems away that should be treated medically, not punitively, he's going to affect many family members of those that are being incarcerated.
The National Association of Assistant United States Attorneys says the policy will, quote, restore the tools that Congress intended to punish drug suspects. For United News International, I'm Neela Uni.
Health Cannabinoid, your ACMPR experts. Consultation services for medical cannabis. Visit healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. That's www.healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. Health Cannabinoid.
total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Just say no.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am here. That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana. Radical Rant.
Well, today in the Radical Rant, we take a look at the economy of weed. And this was brought to my attention by a friend of mine I got into a discussion with who was lamenting the fact that doing what she does as a broker for marijuana, she can't make a living anymore because the price of weed has plummeted so greatly here in the state of Oregon. And I was struggling to try to find some sympathy for that. And I'm afraid I just don't have it. And I know this puts me on the outside of many people's feelings when it comes to the marijuana industry, because I keep hearing one thing over and over is that it's squeezing out the little guy. The little guy can't compete anymore. It's all going to be mega grows. The price can be so low and nobody can make a living growing for that amount of money. Well, that's the way it should be. See, I think there's too many people who take a look at the way the marijuana economy used to be, where you could get $2,000, $3,000 for a pound, and thought that was normal, thought that was reasonable. Now, I always have come from the consumer's side. I've always come from the consumer's point of view, where if I wanted to buy some weed, it was going to cost $300 an ounce. And that's a lot of money, $300 an ounce. When we look at what it really costs to grow cannabis, and even somebody growing inside on a small scale, just a few plants, the cost per ounce to grow that cannabis is anywhere between $12.50 to $25 per ounce. And that's a high level price. If you're a well-capitalized grower with automation and staff and a big grow, you can get that price down even further. Now, I'm all for people making a living. Don't get me wrong on that. But there are a lot of people who are farmers of other crops, who are used to making this sort of living, where the amount you make per acre is a small margin. Farmers who grow potatoes and carrots and kumquats and everything else have had to deal with these realities. That there's a major agribusiness sector out there that can undercut prices, that there's major retailers like Walmart and others that will force you to reduce your prices. And I just don't understand how people in marijuana thought this wouldn't be the case once our product became legal. To me, when you're complaining that the price of weed is falling too much, you're complaining that prohibition is ending too much. That's what it really comes down to for me. For every $300 ounce that I ever bought that made profit for some grower, every one of those $300 ounces was price subsidized by the risk involved with prohibition. The grower could get caught, do serious federal time. Now, never mind for the moment that 7 out of 8 of every busts, of all the busts for marijuana, are for possessors, not sellers. Keep that in mind. But every one of those $300 ounces represented at least $200 of that cost that was owing to middlemen, taking risks, was owing to the possibility that cops could take away your freedom. And most significantly, the cost of those $300 ounces was mostly brokered on the backs of poor Black and Latino people, was mostly created through the destruction of urban neighborhoods, family neighborhoods, the destruction of families. So, yeah, you used to be able to make $300 an ounce. You used to be able to make $2,000 a pound. But you were never figuring in the toll that was caused by that profit. How many people went to prison? How many people's lives were ruined? How many families were broken up? As this becomes a legal industry, the price is going to fall. The day of the $2,000 pound is over. You better get prepared for the day of the $200 pound or lower. That's the way this market is going to move. Now, trying to artificially restrict that access, as some talk about. Some people talk about, well, there ought to be grow caps. There ought to be a limit on how much marijuana they can grow. There ought to be a limit on how many licenses there can be, on how many people can actually be growing. And all that sounds like to me is we need a little prohibition. We don't like the overall prohibition where you can't go shop in a store and people get locked up, but we need a little prohibition. We need just enough prohibition to keep that price just high enough so that the people who are benefiting from the prohibition price subsidy, the people who are benefiting from neighborhoods being destroyed, from families being torn apart, we need to subsidize them a little longer. And I'm sorry, I just don't agree. And what frustrates me so much about this is so many of the people that are on that side talking about, oh my God, there's a glut, there's too much, there's the market is flooded, are some of the same people I worked with for years who lamented the lack of medical access, that patients couldn't get access, that the black market was selling weed for so much that the patients couldn't get their weed for a decent price. If you're one of these people that believes there should be universal access for every patient that needs it at the lowest price possible, that doesn't happen with restrictions. That doesn't happen with quotas. That doesn't happen with license limitations. Oregon is doing this right, and every other state should follow suit in allowing there to be as many licensees, as much production as the market will bear. Let's get these prices down to where they should be in this market. And that's also not to say that there aren't still jobs out there. It's just the types of jobs you had might be different now. No longer are you going to have jobs where you get to wake up whenever you want to wake up. You get to drive to this guy's place, pick up some weed, drive it across the state over there, deliver it to this guy, take the time off when you want, work when you want, don't have to fill out applications, all that kind of stuff. Those days are over. We're a legal regulated market now. You're going to have to fill out applications. You're going to have to go to job interviews. These are the kind of things that are necessary when you're living in a regulated, open market. And for everyone out there that's trying to keep this market as closed as possible, we had absolute prohibition. We had absolute prohibition to keep this market as closed as possible. And that's what got you the rates you were used to. You're never going to get to those rates again. And any sort of attempt to artificially restrict the supply and the cultivation of cannabis is going to lead to higher prices, and it's going to lead to crime. It's going to lead to people breaking that. I mean, already, some of the people complaining about how low the prices have gotten are also participating in unsanctioned black market kind of flea markets where the prices are still lower than what you're finding in the stores. So it's a little disingenuous to say, we need to restrict how many processors and growers there are to keep the legal market in check, while you're also participating in the illegal market that's undercutting. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But then again, I was never in this for the money. Making money on marijuana has never been my goal. My goal has always been ending the mistreatment of our people simply because we use cannabis. Only legalizing marijuana to its utmost, only getting the price down as low as possible, is going to lead to our rights being recognized.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 House of Studios, I'm Radical Russ Belville. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.